Thanks for watching this portion of Garage Logic today on our YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button if you wouldn't mind. And also thanks to our friends at Everest Men's Health for sponsoring this. Go to everestmenshealth.com today to see if they can help you with better energy and better health. And catch the Garage Logic podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Let's do the Al Gore file, shall we?
Oh,
many
sure.
GLers responding to the news yesterday of Al Gore's blatant insistence that he will find and out people who emit what can only be, in his estimation, apparently too much carbon. I don't know if you still have that or not.
I can pull it up, but I think we forgot to do something else, too, by the way.
What's that?
Well, I mean, we keep a file of things just like this, and I believe that required this, did it not?
That deserves this.
Is that worthy of
we
a
should have
grinding?
groin kicked him.
Yeah, I think we should have.
Well, while you look for that, let me go through these emails. Kelsey notes that Prince Charles, of course, wants to militarize the fight against climate change, and Kelsey wonders if it will become enough of a threat that they actually sell one of their castles. The royal family has 46 homes.
Wow.
The Gores have a new home on an ocean front. Scott Matura writes, many Americans have picked up on the fact that the left has done their best to remove religion from our everyday lives, though not religion in the broad sense, but more specifically Judeo-Christian values. Thus, we are left with the feral youth and the lack of moral and ethical integrity. I don't believe it is by accident. But there are eerie similarities to another time in history when something grew out of fear and gained community momentum with no grounding or basis, where citizens turned on each other if for no other reason but to divert attention and speculation away from themselves, where a few loud voices, however misguided, shepherded the many down a path of fear and righteousness in just a few years, but took many years after that to undo what had been done. He's likening the Salem witch trials to climate derangement syndrome. In 1692, a daughter and niece of the Reverend Samuel Parris became ill beyond the scope of medical knowledge, so the doctor diagnosed them as bewitched. And this quickly spread through Salem and resulted in the execution of 19 men and women and several more deaths in prison. If two neighboring farmers were having a dispute, one would accuse the other of being a witch, and suddenly that farmer had to defend not being a witch in court, and sometimes to their failure. And having nothing to do with the original dispute, witch accusations were used as a cudgel that were very difficult to defend. Sound familiar? The use of the word racist card or climate denier? In closing, I was recently having a climate conversation with someone, and I began by asking them perhaps the most poignant Joe Souchere question you have ever asked. What's the temperature supposed to be? Well, not this hot, was the response. Okay, I said, then how about when it's 30 below? Her response, that's not the same. That's bound to happen sometimes. That's just winter. This is who we are attempting to have a rational conversation with. I may as well have tried to tell her that I wasn't a witch. Pushing back is always Scott Matura. Here's the lilac email.
There, you found it.
From Roger. My lilacs are confused, blooming again 5 months later and 6 months early. Probably could be maliciously used by the climate derangementistas, thinking the dry summer and recent cold weather, then warm, faked out the poor things. Curious on your take on this. I don't have a take, Roger. I think it's neat. I'm not alarmed. Chris writes, Gore's Climate Trace Coalition. Al Gore just activated Skynet. Skynet is a highly advanced computer system possessing artificial intelligence. Once it became self-aware, it saw humanity as a threat to its existence due to attempts of the Cyberdyne scientists to deactivate it once it had gained self-awareness. He's having a little fun with that because there are two versions of Skynet. I looked it up. One's fictional, which he's describing, and one's a real satellite system employed, for example, to stop terrorism.
Trace Coalition uses satellites to monitor greenhouse gas emissions. How significant will this technology be for holding countries and companies accountable?
Well, yes, we use it's a coalition of artificial intelligence companies and NGOs. We get data continuously from 300 existing satellites, more than 11,000 ground-based, air-based, sea-based sensors, multiple internet data streams. And using artificial intelligence, all that information is combined, visible light, infrared, all of the other information that is brought in, and we can now accurately determine where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. And next year, we'll have it down to the level of every single power plant, refinery, every large ship, every plane, every waste dump, and we'll have the identities of the people who are responsible for each of those greenhouse gas emission streams. And if investors or governments or civil society activists want to hold them responsible, they will have the information upon which to base their action in holding them responsible.
Paul Root wonders, what's the difference between Cortez Rice intimidating jurists and the judge and Al Gore saying that social activists will hold polluters accountable? Gore is inciting chaos. He has to know his audience is so fearful and so vulnerable and so gullible for this nonsense that he's actually encouraging them to become rats. He's encouraging them to rat out what would be thought to be something that Gore wouldn't accept. It's just appalling. Greetings from the deer stand in Chile Aiken from Steve Wilson. Thanks to Bluetooth technology, I'm able to catch up on yesterday's podcast. Per Al Gore's message to Andrea Mitchell, get ready for protests and riots at every source of life we know. Power plants, airlines, waste management facilities, etc. Publishing names and addresses of the offenders is a breach of privacy, and he basically endorsed foul behavior, saying that would allow protesters to take matters into their own hands. As you mentioned, this is quite eerie. On the bright side, though, after a good forest fire or volcano eruption with copious amounts of carbon emissions, we'll finally get Mother Nature's contact info so we can protest. I have some questions for her as well, like where the hell are the deer and why is our lake down? Good luck, Steve Wilson. Kelsey notes, I guarantee that Al Gore already has a huge personal financial investment in this technology that is going to track the polluters. This is what he and his ilk have been doing for the last 20 years. They invest their own money in a new technology that directly competes with the present utilized technology. Think oil, coal, and gas. Then they heavily invest in alternative energy sources before they use their political power and celebrity status to demonize the original technology. Don't forget that he claimed a net worth of $1.7 million when he was running for president in 2000. He now has a net worth of over $300 million. Scaring people is a great way to get rich. By the way, where was the Me Too movement when it comes to this gas bag? Remember this activity? And then he linked me to the massage parlor assault accusations a couple of gals made against Gore years ago. That seems to have conveniently disappeared. Kelsey is trustworthy. I don't know where he came up with Gore's net worth of over $300 million. You could look it up on Celebrity Net Worth.
I'll do it right now.
I don't know how reliable Celebrity Net Worth is. Brian Matura, who I believe is related to Scott, he writes, I found Al Gore's statement as disturbing as you did. What I heard is he was giving permission to harass and intimidate anyone he feels responsible for climate change, much like that thug that allowed to harass a judge at her own home without any repercussions, or harassing the unvaccinated for being responsible for a never-ending pandemic. As long as the word incite gets used on a regular basis these days, let's use it in this case. Al Gore was inciting the climate change mob with the statement. I found it laughable that he referred to the people who would carry this out as civil activists. They are anything but civil. Larry from Manitoba, we didn't want to be Brian. All right. Hans writes, great question. How in the hell do they have access to these satellites? A, that can't be cheap, and B, who is allowing them to use them? Also, holding people accountable is the new bullying into submission. Al Gore is a bully and a thug. I couldn't agree more. Will climate, who's this from? Okay, will climate change coalition be monitoring the Al Gore mansions? And then I was linked to some pictures of the Al Gore's mansions. So Gore is a bad guy. He's a bad guy.
According to Celebrity Net Worth, yes, he's worth $300 million. I also found another story from financialpost.com as to how Al Gore amassed over $200 million in fortune after his presidential defeat to George W. Bush. Get this.
He did it by peddling this BS.
Well, but he also had other, what would you call it, ventures. Mm-hmm. So in, oh, darn it, this computer is really being awesome today. Here we go. In 2004, the current TV network, which Al Gore helped start, was sold to Qatari-owned Al Jazeera satellite network for roughly $500 million. After debt, he grossed an estimated $70 million for his 20% stake. 2 weeks later, Gore exercised options on 59,000 shares of Apple stock that he'd been granted for serving on the Cupertino, California-based company's board since 2003. On paper, it was about a $30 million payday based on the company's share price on the day he claimed the options. So
He's a dangerous fraud is what he is. He's a dangerous fraud.
bingo.
And he's selling hysteria, and he's benefiting from selling hysteria.